Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Thank you for joining us. In case you're not familiar, this show airs every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live call-in video shows every first and third Mondays at 1 Eastern. You can watch or listen to the show on the live stream syndicated online. You can find the show on your mobile devices or in your cars by saying, "Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 radio network." You can get the Dream Vision apps, or you can catch us on podcasting networks that include iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and more. To learn more, to find our full schedule, and to see our show archives, please go to dreamvision7radio.com. And as always, we're coming to you live from beautiful downtown Middletown, Connecticut, home of the annual Misnomer Pageant. Wow. We have quite a remarkable show today. Full disclosure, my guest, who goes by JoAnna Baanana, I will let her explain that if she so chooses. JoAnna and I have been working together for a shade over 12 years. So I know her well. It just so happens that, chronologically speaking, JoAnna falls right between the ages of my two sons. So I'm especially proud to say that I have witnessed JoAnna's trials and her growing up, and I couldn't be more proud of her. So to all of you, please do welcome JoAnna. JoAnna, would you like to explain the banana part just for openers?
I mean, the first thing I'd like to say is that we are indeed in marketing. So I wanted to use a pen name when I write instead of using my real name, just for security's sake, I suppose. And I thought I'd use something catchy, because if I were to hear about a really good book written by someone named JoAnna Baanana, I would be more inclined to read it than if it was JoAnna Smith. So I opted for that. And it's with two A's, so BAANANA. JoAnnaBaanana.com was free, so I also own the URL. So I figured, why not? I'm just going to take it and run with it.
This is tangential, to be sure, but why did you choose a tropical fruit?
Well, do you remember that song when you were little and it was like, I forget how the beginning of it was, but it was JoAnna Banna Fofana Fee Pie Fofana JoAnna, and that just kind of stuck. So that's where I went with the tropical fruit. I'm sure if JoAnna rhymed with apple, I would have chosen a much more seasonal fruit for my birth month of October.
Okay, on a more serious note, you and maybe some listeners of this show know that I happen to be a fan of Joseph Campbell's work. And when I think about your story, I think about the way Campbell's hero's journey is diagrammed. And that is to say, you know, there's a point of birth, and then there's a separation in which the journeyer, the hero, encounters guides and mentors and spiritual advisors, I suppose, along the way, and then goes through a period of darkness, which could be Hades, it could be psychological darkness. And that constitutes an initiation from which the hero returns with gifts, whether they're knowledge, wisdom, etc. So you have endured a journey of, I'm just going to call it domestic abuse. I think you would probably agree with me that it is patterned somewhat. So I wonder if you could share with us your story, how it came about, and then and what you learned from it. But I want to tell you that in the second segment, I would very much like to talk about how you came to reclaim yourself.
I mean, so I feel like when I think about my early life, right? So who I was, I would say before, as you said, you go into that darkness or that rebirth, or before you get to the rebirth. I kind of, and I think most people are like this, right? So you go through your childhood thinking your parents have all the answers, everyone else knows everything. You develop your super ego, which tells you that you're terrible and awful, and you kind of bring that along with you on your journey. My specific journey, I always felt like one of the mantras that I always had in my head, which is terrible, maybe mantra isn't even the right word, but it was always, it's all your fault. Everything was always my fault growing up. I felt like it was just something that I embraced and I just accepted as the truth. I remember at one point there was and it was on a cassette tape that I had gotten one Christmas. And I remember all the neighborhood kids saying to me, like, oh, it's your song, it's your song. So it wasn't even that it was my mantra. I feel like everyone around me always understood that anything that happened, I was always going to get blamed for it. So I feel as though growing up in that way, I kind of had this mentality that the world was going to happen around me, and I was just to take the brunt of all of that. I was to take all of it. So then as I grew older, you could imagine the situations I would put myself in and the things that I would do in order to create chaos, and then it would be my fault. But I think at one point I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And I specifically remember saying to myself and my friends at one point that I no longer was going to go out to the bars and I wasn't going to go to the clubs anymore. That just wasn't going to be my thing. I was just going to stay home and figure out who I was. And in that 1.5-year time frame, I really did just that. I watched a lot of TV. As you know, I read nonstop. I read a whole lot of books. And I figured that the next step of my life was just going to unfold in front of me, and I was going to just follow it blindly. And that led me to where I was. So after about 1.5 years, I had met someone and continued on my journey thinking that this was the person that was supposed to be for me, and this was exactly how my life was supposed to pan out. And knowing that I went into it with that mentality, I made so many excuses. I would see the red flags and I would run in the other direction. I would make excuses. And it was something in hindsight that I know that I had to go through. And I know you said we'll talk about this later, but I know I had to go through these things. So I am not upset with the decisions that I made or the situation that I was in, because I was an active participant in that. There were things obviously done that were not my fault, that I don't blame myself for, but in that moment, I really kind of did. So it kind of goes full circle if you think about that. And like you said, there's one point where the hero's journey where they just decide they need to do something different and something needs to change. And that was a magical moment for me. And I was able to harness something really deep inside of me that I didn't even know existed to get to that next level.
I was struck when you said that you created chaos. Somebody smarter than me with a psychology degree or something like that would say, well, that's all like subconscious intent. Like you don't even know you're doing that. Do you think that you were, even if subconsciously, do you think that you were trying to create chaos, or do you think the chaos was a product of your trying to fit in?
Sure, if it's an either or in that. Honestly, I think the chaos was a way of rebelling. I was 21, so like that's what my friends were all doing in college, going to parties and doing that kind of stuff. And knowing in part of me, knowing that that really wasn't probably the right path for me to go on if I wanted to have some sort of wonderful future that I had planned for myself, I still did it. So maybe chaos isn't the right word. I wasn't totally I wasn't like poking any bears or making these like dramatic situations around me, but I feel like I was making decisions that were putting me in positions that I probably shouldn't have been in. And looking back at it, maybe there was something subconscious, but I think it was also rebelling. Like if I'm going to get blamed for everything and everything is going to be my fault, let me have some sort of active way to participate in creating this.
On the subject of poking bears, do you want to talk about the domestic situation that you found yourself in, how you initially responded to it and how you might characterize it now.
So for me, I feel like it was a very long time. So it was happening very, very small increments over years, right? So it was never anything that jumped out or like came to it was always something that was just little tiny bits as it went up and up and up and up. So there was things that happened that if I look back on now that I'm aware of what domestic abuse is and what domestic violence looks like and family violence, I would be like, run! Like, this is a huge red flag at month 2 of the relationship. But I didn't know how to define those, right? And you can't know what you don't know. So I can forgive myself for not understanding how to read those flags. But I found myself in that situation just like anyone does. You don't do it on purpose. You one day figure, how am I here? What's going on? Am I going to make it out alive? And then you make that decision at that moment. I don't think I made it very, it was kind of subconscious in a way. It just got to a point where there was just no way I could do it anymore. I ended up calling the police because they were the only way I felt like I could get help. And from that moment on, I knew it was going to be different. It was never going to be the same. I knew that it was going to just go completely crazy. So I just removed myself from the situation. And for me, I am very good in compartmentalizing. My therapist always says, like, you are probably one of the best compartmentalizers that I know, because I can take something and put it over here and know that it's over there. And when I got to that point, I knew, like, I tried for probably 3 or 4 months that let's try to fix it. Let's try to do therapy. Let's try to go to couples therapy. I'm going to do my own. I'm going to take medicine. This is going to be great. But once I was able to take that step back and watch, I could see the patterns. I wasn't living in it anymore. So when you're living in it, you have this like, chaos is another word I guess I'll use. I wasn't expecting to use it so much today. But when you're living in that chaotic environment, it's very hard to see it because you're constantly being like isolated, and you're feeling like it's your fault, and you're being blamed for things, and there's fear and there's fight or flight mode. So there's all these different things. Your amygdala is constantly going, you're walking on eggshells. If you buy the wrong coffee blend, you could end up having a 6-week fight, an argument, and all these kinds of crazy things that could happen off of little tiny things that you're constantly like hyper focused to try to fix and save and work on things. But once I realized that that wasn't going to be the way I was going to live, and once I was separated from it and I could see it in text messages and phone calls at a little bit of an arm's distance, there was no way that I was going to endure that life anymore. Realizing what peace could be, and even for me, peace was living in a 1-bedroom room with my 2 children at my aunt's house, having no space of my own. I found peace. If I can find peace in that environment, there's no way I was going to go back to the horror.
I recognize that hindsight is 20/20, which is why people hate it so much. Our friend Lonnie Ray likes to say that if you're wearing rose-colored glasses, you can't see the red flags. Mm-hmm. What are, and again, I know it's hindsight, but what are some of the red flags that you came to recognize that you either didn't see at first or thought you would be willing to accept, thought that they were workable or not that big a deal?
So for me, I think the biggest one was straight out of my superego, which was it's all your fault. So anytime there was an argument, anytime there was something that happened, and that could be him going out and doing something and me getting upset that it happened, and then him blaming it on me. I wouldn't have done that if you didn't do this. So taking the responsibility for someone else's behavior was a really big one. And that was, again, something, it was always my fault anyway, so I'm just going to take it. Other things were other things were like a lot of lies and uncovering the lies. And again, when you uncover the lies and you go up to someone and you say, hey, you lied to me. And they say, I didn't lie to you. And then you say, look, you did. It's right here. This is exactly what happened. And they say, well, that's your fault that I lied. I didn't want you to do this, or I didn't want you to do that. Again, it's just kind of positioning that. Also, like the pity play was something that I learned about kind of recently that I didn't realize. One of the biggest red flags is when you first start dating someone, or you first start having a relationship of any kind, right? It could even be like friends. when someone comes into it wanting you to always feel bad for them or feel sorry for them, like this struggle that they're going through or the choices that they made, and they really need you to help them, that's a big red flag, because when you meet someone, you usually want to try to get to know them before you let them know certain parts of your life. But when someone comes in and just constantly wants pity and wants you to feel bad for them, it's a really big red flag. But I think the biggest part of it is the totality of it all. Because, right, some of these things can happen in normal relationships, but those are things that happen consistently over time. And then it started getting to screaming and then punching holes in walls and driving drunk and not letting me, being a sober person, drive because I wanted to scare you. There's a lot of different things that happened that you could put them off in one piece. Like, this one thing happened and I'm not going to stand for this one thing. It's not really the way that it goes. But in the totality of it, it begins to kind of erode your world, and you focus so much on these things. Also, like talking to other girls, like that part, I mean, you should just walk away if somebody's doing that. But if they're saying, well, I only did that because, and you accept it, right? So that's something that's going to continue to happen. So there was a lot, honestly. But those are, I would say, the things that happened the most early on.
Isn't that kind of rationalization that you just described, isn't that part of the pattern?
Yeah, but I mean, in normal relationships, you should do that, right? If someone puts the toilet paper on the wrong way and you want the top flowing down and they want the bottom flowing up, you're going to say, is this a problem I want to argue about? We're just going to...
Yeah.
That's the way our brains work. But when you start rationalizing the big things is when it's an issue.
I think maybe it would be a matter of degree, and maybe this is just me, but I would find a difference between somebody putting the toilet paper roll on backwards, even if it's deliberate, and let's say like somebody pointing a gun at me. Those, I mean, am I crazy? Those things seem a little bit different.
Yes, but if that's the situation we want to go with, that was year 9. So that didn't happen year 1. If that happened year 1, I would be running away with my hands up in the air saying, this is not for me. But when you're slowly taken away and you're slowly being removed, I mean, at that point, I'm 5'8", and you know me, you saw me at that time, but I'm 5'8". I was 106 pounds. I was in the hospital for high blood pressure. I was given anti-anxiety, antidepressant medication, which is so far removed from who I am. And I feel very bad for people who suffer from those mental disorders because they're hard. But that's not who I am. And those aren't things that I've ever had to deal with. But that's who I was then, because that's what happens. When you psychologically make excuses for things, eventually your physical body is saying, no, this is unhealthy. You need to stop, because you're not supposed to live with that much cortisol pumping through your body at all times. It's just not what it's supposed to be like. If you're fight or flight more than once a year, that's not the way our bodies are meant to live.
So it kind of reminds me of the sort of faux analogy of the frog in the pot of water.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that there's at least one way in which we're different from frogs, and that is we do recognize there's a point at which the water is just too hot to tolerate anymore. Is that fair to say?
I would say some people do. I don't think that that's a fair blanket statement for everyone.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, given the fact that I watch more true crime shows than is probably good for me, I don't know if we want to draw those out to any conclusions, but we'll let it go at that. I think we're at a point at which we should take our first commercial break. So I will turn that over to Rachel, and we will be back in a few minutes. See you then.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. JoAnna, I referred to my love affair with true crime shows before the break. So I hear things all the time about victims of domestic abuse, victims of intimate partner violence. The last thing I think of you is victim. That is to your credit, and it's a result of your choice. So I'm just going to tell you that my observation is that rather than looking out for help, you decided that that help was within, which is not to say that you didn't get help through counseling, through the unbelievable amount of reading that you've done. So could you please share with us first how and why you made that choice? And then second, what you did to make it real and to get the life you wanted back for yourself?
I mean, I always say this, but I'll say it again. When I became a mother, that was probably one of the most impactful things. I say this to my daughter all the time. Before I had you, I was just JoAnna, but after I had you, I became someone's mom. And that changed my entire world. I was no longer living just for myself. I started to look at, I read a lot, but I started reading a lot about attachment theory and parenting choices and different things like that. And I began to realize that I hold so much power, I guess, within me to help one human being grow into their greatest potential. And I didn't look at my children, even after I had my second child, I never looked at them as creatures for me to develop the way that I want them to develop, or to look at them and say, like all the things I've done wrong in life, they're going to do good. I've always been able to look at them and say, I want you to be the best version of the person that you want to be. And I want to help you uncover who you want to be. So in doing that, I've started recognizing how the patterns of behavior were affecting them, how the screaming and yelling was affecting them, how grabbing them and hiding in a room and slamming the door and hiding and hoping that it all went away, and hoping that we just needed to de-escalate a situation, and seeing their faces during those moments and seeing how nervous but trying to be calm they were, trying to obviously react the way that I was reacting, was breaking me. And for a long time, it happened without them seeing anything. So I was able to continue to take the blows, right? And not physical blows, but take the emotional blows and take it all in. But once I saw that it was affecting them and it was happening in front of them, that's when things started to really change. So I think for me, that was the biggest part. So once it started happening in front of them, I knew that I had to do something to help.
I'm listening to your language, and the very last thing you said was it was something that you had to do.
Sorry, give me 1 second. It is Yom Kippur, so my babies are home watching a movie.
Oh, okay.
So that's all right, but I apologize for that.
No. Understood. Actually, it's actually kind of a perfect fit with the topic, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said it was something you had to do.
Yes.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. No, you didn't. And you can accept this or argue with it. But it seems to me that that's a rather uncommon kind of responsibility that you took. And it's really, it might even be something like paradoxical, because I started out by saying you chose to look within. But in looking within, it enabled you to look out to better see your children and to more responsibly respond to their needs and to their development as people, which I can't help but notice also beautifully coincides with what I take to be your development as a person. Do you ever think about that parallel?
Absolutely, without a doubt. But I also think when you say, and this, I'm sorry if I'm going back to it, but that I had to do it and I didn't have to do it. Maybe there's a better word for that. Maybe I was compelled to do it because I wanted them to grow up in a different way. I always remember being a kid and wanting to be an adult so I could experience peace. Like that was always one of the things that I would like think about. And then as I became an adult, there was like no peace. So I wanted to give them that. I always wanted to give them that. So I knew that I couldn't give them that in where I was. And I obviously could have continued, and they could have continued to have that lifestyle. And who knows where we would be today. But I'm grateful that I didn't, because even in the crazy times that I currently live in, because obviously it doesn't just go away when you have children with that person, it's going to linger for another 12 years in a very minute way, as minute as I can fathom it being. But I don't know, I just feel like I had to make that choice. And maybe that's something like you said about the power within me. There was no way that I could let them endure those things and let them grow up and then make those same mistakes, because they consistently watch them. Like my daughter, who knows, she could grow up and she could go into a situation like that as well. It happens 1 in 4 women in America will be in an abusive relationship in their life. Like that's a staggering number. So she may be able to recognize the signs and say, whoa, I don't want to deal with anything like that. That feels uncomfortable. That doesn't feel right. Maybe I'm offering them the gift of perception by saying, this is what peace is, and this is what peace isn't. What do you like better, type of a thing? I don't know.
Okay. I'm gonna I'll beg forgiveness rather than permission, but I'm going to still see that as uncommon. So that led you to reading, and I don't know if this is a chicken and egg kind of thing, but it also led you to what I'm going to call a kind of activism. I know you've used some organizations as resources. I know you've gotten involved with those organizations from the standpoint of counseling. I also know that you recently got involved with your local municipal government. It's going to take me a while to think of you as a politician, but I'll get there. Is there a chicken and egg thing there? How do you think that evolved from reading to activism, or vice versa? I don't know.
I think it's really funny that you mentioned this, because there have been two people in my previous life, so like before any of this happened, that I hadn't talked to in years, that just kind of reappeared in my life, and I've been having conversations with them, and both of them said, "Oh, you an activist, you in politics? That makes total sense. I could totally see that from who you were before." And I never remember that, but hearing the stories, I volunteered so much in high school for all different kinds. Was really, really big into church. So I personally think, after having those two exposures, that before I was kind of on this path, and then it was totally interrupted. But maybe that was why. Like, maybe I needed that, like you said, that darkness, to be able to understand it. I would never, ever understand domestic abuse. I would never understand the family court system. I would never understand any of this unless I was doing it. There's no way. You even know a lot of my stories and you still don't understand it. I'll tell you things and you're like, no. And I'm like, yeah. So you don't really get it until you're engrossed in it. So I feel like I was kind of on this path. I was interrupted to get what I needed. And I mean, I'm so grateful, because without that relationship, I wouldn't live in Connecticut. I wouldn't have my two beautiful children, and I wouldn't be as intelligent on these topics. So in hindsight, I'm able to be grateful for it. I'm able to move past it. I'm able to compartmentalize it and be okay with what happened to me, because it happens to a lot of people. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know what I didn't know. I will never make those mistakes again. And because of that, I'm grateful. I mean, you always say this. I say, I'll be 39 in a few weeks. And you're like, I did that once. I have so much life left to live. Like, this is great. I get to start now, where some people never get to do that.
You know, I hear some applause in the background. I think it's probably Joseph Campbell. Because I think he would say, well, yeah, I mean, that's your separation and your initiation and your return. Maybe you're exactly right. Maybe you just kind of found your way back to the self you were, and had to be detached from it, had to be separated from it, had to go through that darkness to find your way back. Although I will say, call me stubborn, I could cite people to you who didn't have, the wherewithal or the uncommon responsibility that I think you do, may have had the opportunity to go through that initiation, but didn't recognize it. And so
that's why I'm lucky.
Choice or not, subconscious or not, they stayed exactly the same.
It's funny, we always say in I have like a group of moms called Connecticut Protective Moms. So it's a bunch of people who have been in similar situations. Obviously, they're all different and all across the board, but we kind of come together, and there's a small group of us that really understand each other. And it's so funny not funny, but it's interesting to see that some people, when they have a lot of like post-traumatic stress, because that's what it is, end up with like a debilitating disorder that they cannot get past, and they continue to have all these symptoms for the rest of their life. And then there's some people who take it, churn it around, and are able to come out, and it's more of like a rising up, and like it's like they needed that to stand on. So just realizing that you can have those experiences and it's not your fault. I think that's probably, I'm going to keep going back to that for some reason, like realizing that my whole life, everything wasn't my fault, and you're allowed to make mistakes. I mean, that's another thing I say to my kids all the time. They'll make a mistake and I say, you're allowed to make mistakes. I make them all the time. As long as you learn a lesson, that's the most important part. And I truly believe that deep within my soul.
I'm gonna suggest that as children, if we grow up in particular environments, we do tend to blame ourselves. Because I don't think most children have anything like a natural tendency to even imagine their parents are wrong. So they believe their parents are right. Their parents are not happy. And it just seems that the child ends up blaming himself, herself, whatever that is. If you would, because I want to go in a completely different direction in the next segment. Would you like to talk about your book a little bit?
Yeah, I am in the process of re-editing it, as you very well know. And the title currently, the working title, which it might change, is "It's All My Fault." Where'd
that come from?
If I want to get rid of that inner wound, I got to just spray it out and let everybody get a little piece of it. But it's just going through my story for about 3 to 4 months, starting at when I started to notice things were wrong, when my health was really affected, was the only way that my brain really turned on. And then it ends with me deciding the divorce is the only way to get past this and to get through this. So it's just my journey, maybe a part of my hero's journey, the darkness part.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on this one, the book ends at the point at which you accept that you need to be divorced. Okay. All right. Again, we will change topics when we come back. I think we're going to take our second commercial break now, because I think this next segment may take a few minutes longer. So we'll be good, and we'll be back quite shortly.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told. And the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. JoAnna, most people don't notice at first glance, but I'm male. And I was divorced with 2 children in the late 80s. And my experience was that, at least here in our home state of Connecticut, if you're male with children, it's pretty much over. And there's not a whole lot that's going to go your way. Your experience has suggested to me that things have changed quite a bit and not for the better. Would you please share some of your experiences in that and what you have learned about what you and I would probably agree we should call the court system or the legal system rather than the justice system?
Yeah, so and it's interesting because in the 80s, your experience was exactly what the experiences were in the 80s, which is to say that obviously with most things, there's ebbs and flows and changes that come about. So because of what you movement, which when you are a good father and you get divorced because you guys no longer get along, or if there's like some infidelity or something happens that you decide to end your relationship, you should have the ability to help raise your children. Absolutely. If you're not going to harm them, if you're not going to control them, if you're not going to be abusive in any type of way towards them, if you're not going to scare them or instill fear into them, there's absolutely a need for both parents to be in the child's life. I mean, in our system, it's between 2 and 6% of the cases of divorce go into these high conflict custody battles. It's not the majority of them. It's a small minority that get into the place where I, unfortunately, have discovered has to live. But it only takes one person that has a high conflict attitude or behavior in order to use a system as adversarial as the court system to continue their patterns of behavior. So to continue to try to control and to continue to try to have power. And because of the situation you just described, and because of the movement that happened, most of the time people are able to say, there was no evidence, I wasn't abusive, I never did anything, it's all a lie. And then they are getting equal, if not total custody. I mean, I've seen some horrible cases in Connecticut where protective moms lose complete and utter custody to their abusers. And it's over and over and over again, where it's kind of similar to what I was saying before, the pity party, right? If you're only going to meet someone for 1 hour, a terrible person can make anybody feel sorry for them in 1 hour. And then you have another person who's trying to say, like, this isn't safe, this isn't safe. You're going to say, oh yeah, well, he said you were going to do that. He said this, like, you're saying all these things that aren't true, this poor guy. So that's what you're getting in the system currently. And again, only in that small percentage of cases. So when you're looking at the totality of the system, the judges and the attorneys and the lawyers and the custody evaluators and the GALs and everybody else is able to say, we're doing such a great job most of the time. And they just don't look at this small, minute place.
I can't help thinking about sociopathy and narcissism while you're talking, but I won't go there. You said if even one of the parties is adversarial, that must mean initiates some kind of adversity, right? So yeah. What would have happened, and this is speculative, I grant, if you had been the adversarial one, or in advocating for your children and in pointing out the abuse that took place, are you considered to be adversarial?
Absolutely.
You want to talk a little bit, and I've only read a little bit about this, I will admit, but I think it's called spousal alienation.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit? That is mind-boggling to me.
And I will jump into that. Before I do, I want to say that one of the reasons this is so difficult is A, it's a small population compared to the whole, which I said before, and B, there are so many similarities in a lot of these ideas and a lot of these ways of thinking and ways that the government and the court system kind of have held on to these beliefs. But if I feel like if everyone kind of talked together and figured it out, which is probably the biggest part of our government issues anyway, too, right? If we could all just kind of figure out a way to put all our cards on the table, we'd probably agree with more things than disagree. But instead, we like to butt heads.
Could you, I'm sorry, could you define all, if all of us just got together and talked? Who's all?
So in what I'm going to go into now, and it's
Okay.
parental alienation is the word. And
Okay.
and in a lot of different communities, even the UN has declared it to be garbage science. There's nothing in the DSM. There's nothing to say that the only system that recognizes parental alienation as true is the family court system. That's the only one. And so the difference, the way it goes is if you alienate a child from their parent, which I mean, it happens. I don't like to use the word alienation because it comes from a very, very bad place, which if we have time, I'll get to, but I don't know if we will. I like to say coercive estrangement, because that to me is a better term. So if you say to a child, like, your other parent is bad, your other parent is hurtful, your other parent is this, that's going to harm a child, and you should never do that. I don't do that. If my kids say something, the way I go about it is ask questions. I want them to know they can express themselves. I want them to understand their feelings, the reason why they feel certain things. And that's the most that I can do for them, right? I can't change the way things happen over there. I can only change what I can change. I can only control what I can control. So I don't ever use bad words or bad terms. If anything ever comes up that they feel scared or this happened, again, I ask questions. Why did you feel like that? What happened? I'm so sorry that happened. I imagine that was really scary. I imagine that was really frustrating. I can't imagine, and I'm so sorry. Can I hug you? That's what a kid needs. A kid doesn't need you saying to them, well, yeah, it's because your other parent is such a scumbag and that's the kind of thing that they do. So coercive estrangement happens. It absolutely happens. But where it gets really tricky in this world is abuse, domestic and family abuse, and parental alienation. So parental alienation says if you are estranging your child coercively from the other parent and there is no abuse happening, that is harmful. But no one's sitting there with their phone and saying, oh, I'm getting abused. Let me just hit record and take a video so I can bring it to court and tell them. The people who do that are probably setting it up to be that way. So now you're going into court and you're saying, this person hurt me. This is what happened. This is my story. And the other person is saying, they're absolutely lying. I never did that to them. They are saying these things to my kid. The kid will say to their therapist, my parent hurt me. I feel scared when I'm there. They touched me. And in parental alienation cases, they will have camps and therapies just to make children believe that they are not being abused and their safe, protective parent is telling them those things. And there are cases of this happening with 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who know their reality, and they have to go to these places, tell their stories, and they're told that they are wrong and that their memories are wrong, and then forced to be with the person that hurt them and take pictures and do events to make them be friends with the person who hurt them and to make them have a better relationship with the person who hurt them. Now, if this is coercive estrangement, that might make sense. It also still seems pretty fuzzy to me. I wouldn't want to have a child put in that situation, period. But if you are really being abused by this person, forcing them to do that is so harmful. I couldn't even imagine. And now this started happening, like you said, the 80s. So this started happening in the 90s and the early 2000s. These kids are aging out. If you Google and read these stories, these are children that are now 18 saying the harm that these things did to them, the histories, the stories, what these therapists were telling them, and they knew the truth, but they had to lie or they weren't going to see their other parent again. Like, they're threatened. It's wild. And I can't believe it happens in today's society. And it's starting to get the traction it needs. California just banned reunification camps with a new law called Peaky's Law. And hopefully those kinds of shifts are happening. because it's scary. And these camps that are had, there's no regulation to them. They're not accepted by any sort of therapeutical oversight because they don't believe in this. So they're just run. And you know how much it costs to go to any of these camps? It could be from like $10,000 to $60,000.
And who has to pay that fee?
The parents. They have to split it down the middle. So the parent who is protective, trying to keep their child safe, and the abusive parent, they both have to split these camps for their child, or you go to prison.
So in criminal cases, the burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove wrongdoing. What I'm hearing here is that in family court cases, the burden of proof is on the person being abused to prove the abuse.
Absolutely.
And I guess I have to get my head to stop spinning. What kind of evidence or documentation is the abused person able to provide, and does it carry requisite weight?
I know a case where mom was physically abused, took pictures of all of the cuts and bruises all over her body, and showed them to a GAL, which is a guardian ad litem, which is the attorney for the child, and said, this is what happened. My kids were there when this happened. They know, and they are scared because this is what happened. And that person responsible for the children, the GAL, did not disclose any of it in court and said that they should split custody and the dad was fine.
And do you think that people in the position of the GAL or other so-called authorities, do you think they're afraid? Why do you think
they're not trained?
Okay,
they're trained in both parents should be in the life, both healthy, and they come into the situation with that mindset because they can't judge. They can't decide beforehand who's right and who's wrong. They have to go in thinking both are right and then go from there. Which when you're looking at a case of abuse, that's very, very difficult.
So what happens to all the evidence? So let's just use your example. This woman shows photographs of all of her injuries and says that the children were present when that happened. I have no idea if the children had a voice in whatever procedures took place, but I don't, and you know what? I'm probably not going to do anything except divulge how incredibly naive I am. I don't need to be trained to tell the truth. What do I do with the evidence that I've witnessed?
So they are trained, again, that just because he did it to you doesn't mean he's going to do it to them. Just because this one thing happened doesn't mean it's going to happen every day. It's more healthy for both parents to be in any child's life because of the movement. It's more healthy that both of them are in any child's life than it is to take a parent away. But then if that's the case, in parental alienation, why is the response to remove the protective parent?
You know what?
That's a quandary that I still haven't figured out.
Conceptually and generally, I accept what you're saying. It's true. Children prosper if they have two parents in their lives. What I can't get my head around is what I'm understanding to be the volume of evidence that can be ignored.
Absolutely. Because again, you have both people get the full word, right? So then the other person says, it was only one time. I was so sorry for it. I didn't mean to do that. What happened was she was doing all of this and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I've even heard that was a moment of crisis and we're not in crisis anymore. That's been told to me. There's so many things. And again, if you look at the 100% of people, like you said, it is good for 96% of them to have both of their parents absolutely in their life forever. So now you're looking at this small, tiny percentage and you're just wanting to put the square peg in the circle hole. Who doesn't? I wish I could do it. I wish I was in a situation to be like, let's figure out a way to make this fit into the hole. But that's not the reality of it. And until it's looked at in a different lens, until it's looked at with the totality of evidence, I mean, a lot of times, women I know, they have to go pro se because they don't have enough money for attorneys at times. And they don't know how to get some of this evidence in because the other attorney will say, it's hearsay, it's this. And if you don't know how to go back and forth with these arguments, you can get in a very, very difficult situation very quickly.
I'm I'm really happy to know that you're no longer in crisis. As a result of this conversation, I'm in crisis. But as we're wrapping up here, if people who see this show want to be in touch with you or to learn more about you, where can they go to learn about you?
I would just type JoAnna Baanana, Baanana, and you can see most of my social media pop up. I have a link tree, so you could search that way. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on all of them. And I'd be happy to have any conversations.
Do you have a target date for your book?
I'm thinking by next December, it'll be all buttoned up, wrapped up, and published.
So like 14 months?
Yeah.
Okay. So we will definitely keep people in the loop on that. In the meantime, thank you very much for being here. You have earned the absolute special place you hold in my heart and in Anne's heart. So thank you. And thank you to the rest of you for being here. Please come back. We'll be on next week at 1 Eastern with a gentleman named John Tejada, who has just an amazing story about incarceration and redemption to share. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy.